So the fight between Yoru, the War Devil, and Yuko, now the Justice Devil, has finally begun. And I'm very curious about this whole situation because as straightforward as it is, the tension and or anxiety surrounding this situation is very all over the place. And I think it's purposefully intended to be this way because you're not entirely sure how, on one hand, gruesome it could be with the implication that was served a couple of chapters back, or how catastrophic normal it could actually be. So going into the chapter, you don't actually get the serving of the implication that you would expect because it was stopped short by Yoru, right? With Yuko saying that she would go to school and cause mayhem and mass destruction. She does a little bit, but for the most part, it's pretty self-contained to like a singular classroom. People are able to evacuate pretty much instantly. With the press of a button, the whole school knows and everyone's trying to leave. Yuko manages to catch up to some of Asa's bullies and ends a couple of them, yet the tension surrounding the situation slowly starts to dissipate. And honestly, the more I think about it, it may be because Yoru is adding this different pressure from the sideline. Almost like she's stealing the show just a little bit, but also not enough. See, I went into this fight thinking we may actually get to see a bit more from Yoru. Even though she's in a much weaker state, even though she technically is the War Devil and a horseman of the apocalypse, we'll probably see some intelligence, some techniques, or just genuinely a play-by-play on how she would fight. We get a fraction of that, but not all of it. And it's actually extremely underwhelming, but again, I think it's purposeful to kind of tease you into the idea of what Yoru is capable of, how she handles the situation, but also there's a much bigger goal here. And I think it does click with Yoru very quickly with how underpowered she truly is. So Yuko pretty much takes control of the situation, killing a couple of students, reading everyone's minds, and basically stopping everything that Yoru is throwing her way. It's kind of cute though because she turns these little pencils into like full spears, and she has scattered all of this equipment around the school and every single classroom and hallway and restroom just in case for a situation like this. The pre-planning from Yoru is impeccable. I don't know when she done this, and I also don't think it's actually for Yuko and more specifically designed for Chainsaw Man. Yuko is very difficult to fight because she can read minds extremely well. However, this is slowly what I believe to be playing down into her detriment of overreading certain situations, right? What I mean by this is that later on you will see Yoru make a decision that seems a little bit odd, but with enough thought behind it and with a plan set out in motion, the leave it all to Asa plan, there's definitely a motion to her plan that's currently in action. And I would assume at this time it is using Yuko's mind reading ability against her and taking her by surprise. Before we get there, however, we get introduced to some Devil Hunter Club members, some dude with brass knuckles with spikes on them, another guy with a crossbow, and then a mysterious woman with a samurai sword. Now the first two people are hit or miss. They do a bit of damage to Yuko, but ultimately they get washed pretty quickly. The guy with the crossbow, he gets stabbed. The guy with the brass knuckles loses an eye, but the woman with the sword never introduces herself. You don't know her name, you don't know what her face looks like, and she's kind of just shadowed as a mysterious figure. I wouldn't be surprised if two of these individuals become more prevalent later on. I'm more leaning towards the swordswoman, but also the guy with the brass knuckles only losing an eye. He could become a valuable asset much later on, and Yoru might make the intention of connecting with them to turn them into weapons. Would make a lot of sense. Crossbow guy hit or miss. He got stabbed in the stomach. He most likely should be dead, but ultimately they seem very interesting, even though they were kind of just thrown in here to fight against Yuko and really stood no chance other than the swordswoman who done the most damage. They get sidelined pretty quickly. It was great that they were thrown in here because you get to see just how warped Yuko has become. And I was wondering if we were ever going to see this within motion, the actual thought process behind how she dictates her type of justice. Turns out she was actually just going easy on these three. So the injuries that Yuko sustained because of them, she basically let them. And she felt bad because she didn't want to fight or kill innocent people, but then she warps the perception. She's seen it as them ganging up on her and bullying her. Now that makes them bad guys. And that's when she subsequently sidelines them all within an instant. This would lead us to the ending of the chapter with Yoru and Yuko face to face and the quote-unquote leave it all to Asa plan. This is what I'm curious about, right? Yoru made it through this whole point, realizing that she couldn't really do much damage, and I'm sure she knew this probably prior as well, and yet now she wants to bring out Asa. Now she wants to utilize the relationship between Asa and Yuko. As much as it seems like an odd choice for Yoru to make, I think it might be the smartest, and there's a good reason for this. The more of a relationship that Asa and Yuko build, with her having this warped perception of justice and this obsession with Asa and trying to help her, what better way to control, build, and even take Yuko by surprise is to hide behind the person person that she is obsessed with. Just based on them switching and the quote-unquote leave it all to Asa plan, Yuko cannot read the minds of both Asa and Yoru at the same time. It's whoever is in control. So as soon as Asa comes back up into the picture, Yuko's attention instantly knows this and switches. She's more kind and more caring, and she's speaking differently, and Asa is bringing forth her own plan that Yuko does not want to deal with whatsoever. I don't know what this plan could be. Asa might want to hurt herself or hurt others to corrupt herself, which would force Yuko to do something that she shouldn't and kind of build that sense of guilt a lot more, and this is where the switch would take place, the surprise. The way I think about it, theoretically, Yoru can take control whenever. We just need to surprise Yuko because she can read minds. It's very difficult. If Asa were to lure in Yuko that way and force her to do something that she clearly doesn't want to do to Asa, Yoru can capitalize on that when she goes in for a killing blow, take control of Asa's body again, and do hopefully the death-dealing blow, and manipulate or control the body in whatever way she sees fit, and then weaponize it. To me, at the moment, this seems like the more logical outcome. I don't think Asa, however, is a part of this plan. Maybe partially to get her away from the school. I think Asa wants to help people, but also is willing to sacrifice herself in the process. Maybe. It's hard to tell between Asa and Yoru because at times they mesh and work really well with each other, but then on the other side they conflict and clash quite often. So at this point they seem like they're somewhat in cohesion, but it could easily be derailed, and it might just be Yoru manipulating the entire plan from the beginning. That whatever process is going to happen will happen, and Yoru will suddenly appear and surprise Yuko anyway, regardless of where they are. This ends off the chapter, but it does bring forth some interesting questions. If Yuko is killed, does her human body remain? Can she still live and be by Asa and Yoru's side, but just as a weapon, if that makes sense? If not, is it just the devil version? And if it's the devil version, do we also get the Justice Devil as like a secondary accomplishment? Does that make sense? Similar to Makima, in a way. If the four horsemen of the apocalypse are realistically higher than normal devils and have that power over them and these secondary, third, fourth like abilities that are just part of their essential being, I wouldn't be surprised if Yoru can take control of other devils really easily. So even if the main devil, like the Justice Devil, was contracted with 4 other devils, for example, Yoru could just take the Justice Devil and get the 4 extra as an added bonus. We already know that she can weaponize very, very powerful devils, but how far does that linkage go? If one human is contracted with an endless amount of devils and has all of this power, if Yoru takes control of that human, would she get all of those devils? I would assume so. She's powerful at the end of the day, and I think that's what makes her so powerful, is because she just has an endless amount of weapons at her disposal. She is the embodiment of war itself and the amount of components that make up war. Not even just physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, even. You have stuff that doesn't even equate to a damage factor, like surveillance and technology, even just knowledge itself. All of this would seemingly be the architecture of war and would make her endlessly powerful. Alright, so if we roll through that idea, what would be the curveball within there? What would be the typical Fujimoto spin that would just corrupt the whole situation and just change our perceptions entirely? Honestly, Denji and Yoshida. Either one of these individuals I feel like is going to rock up. On one hand, I feel like it would be Yoshida because Asa would have to try to explain the situation, and then that would make Yoshida more sus, and then it'd be like this cat and mouse game, right? Remember when I asked the question at the beginning of part 2 if Yoshida knew about Yoru? Basically, could he see the scars? I still don't think that's true. I don't think he was the one talking in that situation. If you go back to the speech bubbles, it seems more inclined to believe that it's actually Asa. She's the one that seems confused. She's the one that's kind of answering back, but it's more so framed within Yoshida's character. I think he's sus on the idea of Asa, but I don't think anyone else sees the scars. Only Yuko can see them, because not only is she a devil, but she can also read the mind. So if Yoshida comes in, this would make for a very complex situation that would grow in a pretty weird direction. The War Devil's identity needs to be kept secret, especially from whoever Yoshida is working with. But then you have Denji, and deep down, as much as we would all love this, I don't think it would end the way that we probably would want it to. Denji doesn't really have a care for saving people and more so just killing devils, but I think it would make perfect sense now that I run the thought through my head. If this whole plan of Yoru's comes crumbling down, surprising Yuko by hiding behind Asa and weaponizing her is because Denji comes in and kills Yuko before she gets the chance of doing it. Do you know how much of a conflict that would cause between all of them? Asa already thinks Denji's a loser, and Denji's on this weird approval acceptance mode of trying to show himself to the world that he is Chainsaw Man, but he wants people to find out within their own regard, and he doesn't want to forcefully give it to them. So this for me would just complicate the situation further. Asa would be upset because Yuko is dead, and Yoru would be upset because she didn't get a weapon. And just to really tie it off nicely, before they even react, before Yoru can get angry and fight Chainsaw Man within school, Yoshida appears. And potentially, with Yoru being the smart individual that she is at times, realize that she cannot fight Chainsaw Man at all, or what Yoshida is. There's a lot of ways that this can go, but I'm very excited. We're getting another chapter next week, which is very good, but I would love to hear your thoughts, so let me know how you feel.